Welcome to a new time. Welcome to a new era.
This ain't WCW. This ain't Monday Night Raw. This ain't SmackDown. This ain't even WWE.
Feel the wrath of the pythons. You shall feel the wrath of Hulkamania. This is where the power lies.
And that's the bottom line because Stone Cold said so.
He put hard times on Dusty Rhodes and his family.
I got a 66 and 2/3 chance of winning because Kurt Angle knows he can't beat me and he's not even going to try.
It's time to step into the squared circle and get it done.
Welcome everyone to Legends and Champions. This week, Andy Evans here, coming to you as always from the great town of Weymouth here in the UK. And tonight, or this week, this morning, this afternoon, whenever you're listening to this, we're going to be doing a unique show talking all about the legendary ring announcers in professional wrestling. And I will do my best not to do any imitations, although I can't guarantee it. As part of this, I'm also going to be delving into the archives and presenting an interview that hasn't been heard in over, nearly 20 years. And that was when I conducted it with my former broadcast colleague Lee on the original LEC, and that's with Gary Michael Capetta. So we'll be playing that a little bit later on, and you can see how my voice has changed from when I was a wee nipper to now being an old man. But how is everyone? Hope you're doing okay. What a week we've had in professional wrestling. The ACT guys have been back doing a cracking show on the fallout from Survivor Series. Mike was obviously back doing Maguire on wrestling. And of course I'm here talking all about the old school days. And are we all ready for Christmas? It's 2 weeks now away until the big man comes down those chimneys and fills our stockings with glee and gives us a load of presents. Well, maybe. I don't know. I've kind of vetoed it this year. I've spent the money on my little one and my wife, but nothing for me. I kind of said, no, I don't want to do it. Just being here doing this show with all of you is good enough for me. But now it's that time of the week. Let's get to this.
He'll make it sweet. He'll make it short. It's time for Andy's Weather Report.
Yeah. It's cold. The weather report today here in Weymouth, here in the United Kingdom, is it's currently 2 degrees. It's 1:45 in the afternoon. There is no sun. It's grey skies. It's very, very cold. And we're all having a great time. No, we're not. Tomorrow morning I am heading to Reading, so I'll be getting the early train, like the really, really early train, to get to that city. And it'll be dark when I leave, it'll be dark when I get home, and it's meant to be really cold. Now this weekend we had what's called Storm Dara, I think it was. I think the name was Storm Dara. And I literally went to get my hair cut, and I decided to use public transport. Don't know why I did that, but I took the public transport and I went out, and as soon as I landed in the town centre, got off the bus, as you do, and this little old woman, this 92-year-old woman, got blown over by the gust of wind. They were that strong. So there's me and this other bloke trying to pick her up, making sure she was okay. But the wind was so strong that if it hit you in the face, you couldn't move. It literally, just the force was incredible. It's like the force will stop you. Went to the dark side. One other thing I want to touch on before we start talking about the rest of the show, and I realise this is like the preamble, the waffle, and I'm also going at like 190 miles an hour. That's because I've had 5 coffees, maybe. Is the fact that anyone who's got Game Pass, Microsoft Xbox or PC Game Pass, if you have, then give me a big yes. Silence. You're all listening. If you're giving a big yes, brilliant. Who has downloaded the new Indiana Jones game that's available now on Game Pass, or you can buy it from the store? It is tremendous. I've only played a little bit of it, but it is just like being in an Indiana Jones film. The camera work is amazing. The opening scene is straight from Raiders. If you are an indie fan, get this, because I'm stuck playing Star Wars Outlaws. I'm at the last level. I can't beat it. I'm now fixated on playing Indiana Jones. So recommendation. That's a new one. Joe, I need a new segment, Andy's video game recommendation, on this show. Can you do that? Can you do me an intro? Can you do that? Brilliant. All right, let's get to it, shall we? Let's talk about this week's topic. And today we're stepping out of the squared circle in terms of looking at events, and we're looking at those voices that call the action. And I'm not talking about the commentary team. I'm not talking about Gorilla Monsoon. I'm not talking about Jesse Ventura, who, by the way, is coming back this Saturday for Saturday night's main event. We are talking about the ring announcers. And why are they so important? Because really, the ring announcer is the heartbeat of the show. They are the ones who get the crowd going. You know, they are not just the voice that introduces the wrestlers. They're the heartbeat of the event. Their job is to set the tone, to build the excitement, to provide the audience with that essential information about the matches, what's going to happen. And really, they are your front line. They bridge the gap between the spectacle and the fans, making sure that everyone is engaged and informed. And we've got our own MC extraordinaire on this network with Mike. And if you go and check out some of Dungeon Wrestling on YouTube, you can see the master at work. And today, what I'm going to do is focus on just a few of those legendary performers, kicking off with the man, Howard Finkel. Born June 7th, 1950 in Newark, New Jersey, Howard began his career in professional wrestling in 1975 with the WWF, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, which later, as we all know, became the World Wrestling Federation and now the World Wrestling Entertainment. It was at Madison Square Garden that he made his debut in the ring, and that took place on January the 17th, 1977. And he became known for that distinctive voice and that charismatic announcing quality, something that I try and emulate to this day if I'm calling a match, if I'm doing the ring announcing for anything, really. It was in 1979 that Finkel was the lead ring announcer for the biggest events in the WWF. He became the first employee of the WWE when it was established in 1980 and was known for his signature call for announcing new champions. Singing along the lines of, and new World Wrestling Federation. And not bad. Not bad. His voice became synonymous with the WWE because unlike some of the ring announcers, he hasn't moved around. He wasn't released. He wasn't let go. And he announced many of the iconic moments and performers, like Hogan, like Austin, like The Undertaker. He's also not afraid to, or he wasn't afraid to make himself look foolish. And we saw that in 1993 at WrestleMania 9 when he came out as Finkus Maximus. We saw that on Legends House. And we saw it in 1993 during an episode of Raw where his car was damaged by HBK and Kurt Hennig in a brawl outside the Manhattan Center. As the years progressed, his schedule went lighter. He was still doing the big pay-per-views. He was still doing the WrestleManias and the SummerSlam and the Survivor Series. But he did step back and he did take a downturn in health. And it was in 2011 when he returned to the WWF at WrestleMania 27 to announce the one and only best in the world CM Punk to the ring. And it got the massive ovation from the crowd. One of the biggest pops ever in professional wrestling. He unfortunately passed away on April the 16th in 2020 at the age of 69 due to complications from a rare form of brain disease. In 2009, he was inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame and is remembered as one of the greatest ring announcers of all time. And I think that, you know, when you think of iconic moments, when you think of professional wrestling, you instantly get drawn to, I think, 3 or 4 matches. Brett versus Michaels at WrestleMania 12, Savage versus Steamboat at WrestleMania 3, Warrior Hogan at WrestleMania 6, Bulldog Hitman at SummerSlam 92, and let's go with Hulk and Andre at WrestleMania 3, if you're looking at that golden era. The one common finality there was Howard Finkel, and he, to get 93,000 people in the palm of your hand, calling an announcement is a skill, and not everybody can do it. We've seen a lot of ring announcers fail. And I think the problem with the WWE, or the problem in this industry, regardless now, is he is at that pedestal. He is at that top of that light. And no one will ever match up to the legacy of one Howard Finkel. Now, there is another guy who did a little bit of ring announcing, but he's known more as a backstage announcer, and that is Gene Okerlund, Mean Gene Okerlund, born on December the 19th, 1942 in Brookings, South Dakota. And Gene really kind of started off in the AWA, working for Vern Gagne. He moved to the WWF in 1984, and he joined WCW in the late 90s, and that was due to a contract dispute. So this is around the I guess the 94, 93, 94 period, so the early 90s. Yeah, in the 90s, 93, 94. The thing about Gene was he was known for his calm demeanor, his quick wit, and he really did conduct some of the most memorable interviews with the guys like Hogan and Ric Flair, because he packed no punches, right? He wasn't afraid to challenge the performer. He wasn't afraid to show a facial expression that meant that, you know, he was peed off with somebody, or he didn't agree with someone, or he challenged someone. And, you know, I remember watching the run-up to WrestleMania 7, which was Hulk Hogan and Sergeant Slaughter in LA at the Memorial Coliseum in Los Angeles. And it was that episode, I think it was Superstars, where Slaughter burnt Hogan's t-shirt, right? And the look on his face and the way he called him out, he said what we as fans wanted to say. You know, what the hell are you doing? Why are you doing this? How can you do this to the All-American Hulk Hogan? How can you do this to a piece of Americana? And he got away with it, and the fans loved him for it. And then you had the goofy side, you know, the 1990 Survivor Series, for example, with the birth of the egg, the hatching of the egg. I mean, we've seen a lot of things in professional wrestling. The 1990 Survivor Series with the birth of the egg, the cracking of the egg, the hatching of the egg, I can't get my words out, and also the arrival of The Undertaker. And Gene is selling this as though it's the most legit, straight thing to ever happen. It's normal to walk in an arena on a Sunday evening in 1990, in November, and see a big, giant fake egg, and Chavo Guerrero would jump out of it as the gobbledygooker, and then dance the do-si-do with Gene Okerlund. He sold it as though it was just another day in the office. And that's why he was so good. When he went to WCW, I think they kind of, I don't know if they toned him down a little bit. I felt that with Gene, when he went to WCW, he was a bit more, what's the word? Turned into a bit more of a slimy salesperson, if you will. I think the superstar line, you know, trying to get people involved, and call 1-800-991-WCW to find out which WWF superstars I saw having dinner. Hey. It was a bit sleazy, and, you know, that's where the whole Scheme Gene skits from the 1996 New Generation campaign with Billionaire Ted and the Nacho Man and the Huckster. And he didn't like those, by the way. He hated them. And I think the WCW move hurt him. For WCW, it added so much more credibility to them, because finally they had a big name, one of the most respected announcers. But yeah, for him, I don't think it really worked. Although, you know, he did conduct the most iconic moment in professional wrestling, which is still talked about to this day, at Daytona Beach in Florida, at Bash of the Beach '96, when Hogan formed the NWO and all that trash can. And I think it was Gene that actually said something along the lines of the New World Order. So he has been, you know, if you think about these two, you think about Howard Finkel, you think about Gene Okerlund, and you just suddenly go, I can't think of a moment as an old school fan, a pivotal moment where they weren't there. And as much as we don't want to talk about the dude so much now, you've also got to think the same about Vince McMahon, because it was really that those three were there at all of the most iconic moments. Whether or not it was Michaels winning the championship and the boyhood dream has come true for Shawn Michaels, or it was, Hogan body slamming Andre in front of 93,000 fans, or it was TLC 1, or it was whatever, Montreal. 1, 2, or 3 have all been there, and they are part of history, and that's what makes them so amazing, so incredible. And for me, it's my childhood. We talked about this last week about, is Hulk Hogan the most influential person in professional wrestling? And we had that conversation. I'll go to Facebook in a bit. Remind me, who am I talking to here? Because I'm talking to myself. I'll go to Facebook and read a comment from Team MOW. These three, for me, are on my Mount Rushmore of wrestling announcers. And who will join them? Let's go to a quick break. When we come back, more legends about the ring announcers.
Hey, yo, how many of you here came to listen to your same generic wrestling podcast? Or how many of you came to listen to the alternate commentary table every single Saturday?
You're going to get our perspective of what the real fans of wrestling think, and no one does it like us.
Subscribe and stream to the Maguire on Wrestling podcast feed anywhere where you're streaming your podcasts. Survey says one more for the Greek guys.
Chair shot.
All right, we are back with Legends and Champions, talking more about the ring announcers of the golden era of professional wrestling. And we're going to continue on now by talking about someone who has just come back to the company. Lillian Garcia, born Lillian Annette Garcia on August the 19th, 1966 in the Panama Canal Zone, spent her early years in the country of Spain due to her father's work with the American Embassy. She moved back to the US at the age of 8 and admits that she grew up as a military brat attending American military bases. She graduated from Irmo High School in Columbia and attended the University of South Carolina, where she graduated. Now, Lillian Garcia is an intriguing one because she's not just known as being the first main female voice of the WWF. She's also one of the most talented singers that you could come across. And her passion for singing began in Madrid, where she participated in various singing contests with her sister from the age of 5. It was in her teen years, however, she sang with a band at clubs around Colombia and South Carolina. She appeared in the 1990 film Modern Love as a singer and became a popular radio host in Colombia. She also served as a karaoke host at the Night Lights nightclub in the Embassy Suites Hotel in Colombia. But it was in 1999, specifically August the 23rd, when she became known to her wrestling audiences, and that took place on an episode of Raw is War from Amy's, Iowa. She then, after that, became a fixture in the WWE, known for her energetic announcing and her ability to do what The Think did and connect with the audience. She also holds the record for singing the US national anthem at WrestleMania for the most number of times, beating the diva, the icon, Aretha Franklin. She performed at WrestleMania 2000, WrestleMania 21, and WrestleMania 28, making her the performer with the most musical performances. And those performances are legendary, with the rendition of America the Beautiful at 28 being particularly memorable. For Garcia, though, it's all about making history. And she continued to make history as being the first female in-cage announcer for Professional Fighting League, the PFL, a version of UFC. She also announced the first ever women's pay-per-view event called Evolution back in 2018. She married her partner, Christopher Joseph, in 2009. They divorced in 2022. She's both fluent in English and Spanish. And she's celebrating not only for her announcing skills, but for her contributions to WWE as a singer and as a podcaster. And we all know that it was recently that she came back to the WWE to replace Samantha Irvine, who left because she no longer wanted to play game and be a ring announcer. No, we love you, Sam. The thing about Lillian is, Lillian's not afraid to make a mistake. All right, and when you're on live TV, mistakes are going to happen, fluffs are going to happen. But Lillian seems to make quite a lot of them. Whether or not it's not being able to get out the ring on time and getting knocked off the apron by a performer, or whether it's announcing a match wrong. I think her opening return match on Raw a few weeks ago, something was wrong. But we love her. She just covers it. You know, she doesn't let it. She's a pro. She doesn't let it get to her. She carries it on. And when you think about, you know, just like the Think, in the Attitude Era of the WWF and the Invasion angle, she was that voice. She became the voice of the WWE. Obviously, the brand split happened and Justin Roberts came in. But it was Lillian Garcia, again, that we still go to. We still talk about. And over on the TNA side, the same could be said for Jeremy Borash. Again, born July the 19th, 1974 in Minneapolis. He had a diverse career, starting with WCW, becoming a figure in TNA. He wore many hats, not only as a ring announcer, but a producer, but a writer. A whole show could be done on the career of Jeremy Borash. And maybe it will be down the line. You know, he's worked with WCW until its closure in 2001. As we said, he became a cornerstone of TNA, being that ring announcer for those key pay-per-view matchups, the Slammiversaries, the Bound for Glories. But it was in 2018 where he left, kind of went behind the scenes in NXT and joined the WWE in 2018. Known for playing outside of the box, if you will, such as the broken Matt Hardy segments for TNA and the Hardy Compound. Being known as the man who announced the significant matches in TNA, majority of them for AJ. Borash's ability, his adaptability and his creativity have made him one of the most valuable assets for every promotion that he's been with. Another voice of TNA is also a voice of WCW, and that is David Penza, who brought his unique style to the ring from WCW from 1995 until its closure in 2001. Born on May 22nd, 1966, Penza's announcing began in the GWA, the Global Wrestling Alliance. He succeeded Gary Michael Capetta as the main announcer for WCW. We're going to be talking more about Gary in just a second. He also holds the distinction of announcing every episode of Nitro and Thunder. I feel sorry for him. Because why? Why would you want to do it? He continued his announcing career with Impact from 2006 to 2010 and returned in 2020, replaced in the meantime by Christy Hemme. And he's known for some of the most controversial moments in WCW history, including the finger poke of doom with the infamous match between Hulk Hogan and Kevin Nash, where it's literally the finger down the three. He also announced the final match on WCW's last Nitro before the acquisition of WWE went through. And I think the thing about David Penza is, he was a bit like the Think, right? He was steady. He was professional. He had a recognizable voice that if you heard it, you instantly knew where you were and who you were with and what you were doing. And that really made him a fan favourite, to the point that when he was let go from TNA, there was public outcry. Why have you done it? Why has he gone? And when he came back, there was a public rejoicing because he's that good. And I think he still deserves a spot in professional wrestling today. I do wish that David Penza was, working for All Elite, replacing Justin Roberts, or even back in the WWE. I think, he had a shot at the WWE, and I think he would have made a massive difference, and he would have been the closest we would have got to the Fink. And maybe they should have brought him back when Sam Irving left instead of bringing Lillian back, but that's not my decision. Right, I'm going to go to a break. When we come back, we're going to do something different. We're going to open the archives, and we're going to bring you an interview that I conducted back in 2008 with Lee Tyers, with Gary Michael Capetta, talking about his career in WCW and, at the time, the release of his book, Bodyslam. We'll see you after this, where we're going to touch more about some more ring announcers and a little bit of Saturday night's main event. We will see you in just a second. See you later.
Welcome everybody to the Legends and Champions podcast. Lee and Andy here with you once again, and another very special guest with us this week. He is not only the author of the best-selling book Bodyslam's Memoirs of a Wrestling Pitchman, he's also one of the most recognisable voices from the old school days. If you love wrestling from the 80s and 90s like we do, you will definitely recognise this man. His name's Gary Michael Capetta. Gary, thank you very much for coming on the show.
I appreciate you inviting me.
No problem at all. It's great to have you on. Now, obviously, we've both had a good read through your book, Bodyslams, which is available through Amazon and a lot of other great sites. Got a great source of information there about you, and we're going to be talking about the book a little bit later on in the interview. But what was it about wrestling that fascinated you whilst you were growing up, and what was it about the wrestling bug that bit you?
I thought it was crazy. I thought it was surreal. I thought it was weird. Back in the day when I was a kid and I started to watch, they had some pretty crazy characters that they were passing off as being real. Someone like a George the Animal Steele, for instance. And when you would look at him and you'd say, this is not the kind of a person that I would walk into if I was walking down the street, but yet they were portraying him like, you should be able to run into him. So it was just very strange. Then when I was watching midget wrestling, watching these four dwarfs throw each other around, it's kind of strange. So for a kid, I was attracted to it, and I was a little bit embarrassed by watching it because at the time, people just thought that you were an idiot if you watched wrestling, quite honestly. So, but it was the strangeness of it.
Okay, now in Bodyslams, you mentioned that one of your heroes in the wrestling industry was former WWF World Champion Bruno Sammartino. Now, what was it about Bruno that really captivated you and your interest?
Because Bruno was a contrast to those crazy folks that I just alluded to. He was a kind of a very humble, very sincere type guy who would, when he would do his interview, he wouldn't yell, he wouldn't rant, he would just simply look at his audience and he would talk to you. And it was like you were his friend after you listened to him, and you wanted to support him, and you wanted to go out and you wanted to cheer for him, and you didn't want anything bad to happen to him, even though you knew by looking at him and by watching him wrestle that he could handle himself. You just kind of wanted to be on his side, which obviously at the time we didn't have pay-per-views, we didn't have network specials. It was just a matter of watching the weekly show and going to the arena. So he would cause you to want to go to the arena to so that you could cheer for him and be on his side, basically. And of course, he was the guy that always did the right thing. At the time, it was good versus evil. There was nothing in between, and that was the attraction for Bruno.
Okay, now, of course, as we mentioned earlier on, your early part of your career, you worked for the WWF, obviously under the tutelage of Vince McMahon Sr. Now, what was it like working for the elder Vince McMahon? And what, obviously, whilst we're on the subject, what were your initial impressions of Vince Jr.?
I was a fan still when I started to work for them. And those who know old school wrestling understand that it was a very closed society, and it was not a society that I was easily going to be accepted into. You had to develop some kind of trust, loyalty, and that had to be proven. So for me, when I entered, one week I was watching these guys on television, and then the next week when I started, I was in the ring. I was not allowed in the locker room. There was a distance that was kept, and I was intimidating. I was very intimidated. And when I started, the commentator was Vince McMahon Jr. So he was the commentator for his dad, but he never presented to the public that he was in any way related to or connected to the promotion. And he was always an arrogant kind of guy. So that's never changed over the years.
Now, one of the guys that really brought you into the WWF was Gorilla Monsoon. Can you tell us your feelings and your memories towards the man that you affectionately labeled Gino?
At the time when I started, I didn't know that he was one of the owners of the WWF. And I didn't understand the power that he had, when in fact he owned about 20-25% of the organization. And I also didn't know that he was in charge of all TV production for the McMahons. So, but he had hired me. He was the one that brought me in. And he was also the one that put me on television for the first time, so that I became the ring announcer for the main WWF show on weekly TV in the United States. With time, I came to appreciate the power that he had. So when I usually refer to him as my patron saint in wrestling, because he was the person that allowed me in, and he was the person that kept me in my place as the lead announcer for 11 years.
Okay, now, you mentioned earlier on one of the characters being George the Animal Steele. Now, one of the stories that you recount in Bodyslams was when you first made your debut on TV, and the name George the Animal Steele from that point filled you with dread. Can you explain to our listeners why that is?
Because, as I mentioned before, I was still a fan, and I still was on the fence in believing that what was going on in the ring and who these people were was for real. And he knew that. And he played with it. And picture George Steele, as everyone knows, big, hairy guy, couldn't speak English, flapping his arms, and was really scary. And here I was, diminutive, bow-tie clad announcer, this skinny little kid. And I always wore a carnation boutonniere, and he always went after it. So it was a cat and mouse kind of game where he would chase me, but he would never actually catch me. He was toying with me. I was serious because I was getting the hell out of there. I didn't want to get hurt. So what it did was it reinforced the idea that this guy was a beast and out of control, and it also brought attention to me, an announcer that in those times, unlike today, the ring announcer was never mentioned. I was never mentioned in 11 years by name on the air. But it did bring attention to me. Fans were just feeling sorry for me. So it enhanced his career, it enhanced my career, and it was all George Steele's doing.
Okay, now after you left the WWF, you moved on to the collaboration between the AWA and the NWA, known as Pro Wrestling USA. Now, what did you think of the Pro Wrestling USA project, and where do you think it fell down?
Well, to me, anything outside of the WWF was refreshing, because at the time when there were territories, you didn't have a chance to see wrestling in other parts of the United States. The WWF, and then in '79 changed to the WWF, only was in the northeastern part of the country. And even though the northeastern part of the country had the largest concentration of big cities, it was still only in the United States from Maine down to Washington, D.C., and out to Pittsburgh. So most of the country was NWA or AWA. So I never had seen the wrestlers from those other areas. By the time that they started to come into this part of the country, it was because McMahon was invading their territories, and I was being used less and less with the WWF. Reason being was that Gorilla Monsoon was forced to sell his shares of ownership with the company. So he lost his power. And when he lost his power, I lost my patron saint. Vince McMahon Jr. never liked me, so never intended to use me as he expanded nationally. So when they came into the area, they knew that the WWF fans had an identity with me. They identified with me. They believed what I said. Credibility was my number one asset to any promotion. It had nothing to do with what I looked like, obviously. It had nothing to do with my voice. Howard Finkel has a much better announce voice than I do. But what I had was a believability and a credibility. And I think that I can safely say that I'm the only individual who ever worked for the WWF, the NWA, and the AWA all at the same time, because I was phasing out of the WWF, and I picked up some work with the Pro Wrestling USA, which was, as you said, the combination of NWA and AWA. And that was like heresy to work for another organization. But I saw that my future was going to be short, and I had it with the arrogance of McMahon, so I just decided to do what I thought was going to extend my career.
Okay, now after Pro USA folded, you kind of stayed with the AWA a little bit longer. And one of the interesting things for me that come out of reading Bodyslams was Vern Gagne asking you what you thought of the TV show, and then he admitted that he had never actually seen it. Do you think that's why the AWA was never able to really capitalize going into the mid-'80s? Or what would you have done to ensure the AWA's success?
Yeah, it wasn't that he had never seen the show that was the reason for their lack of success, because whether he had seen it or not wouldn't have mattered. It was that he didn't know how to advance the product into the 80s. He didn't know how to change the product to keep up with the times. I don't mean to take anything away from the regional promoters, but for years and years, they were the only game in town. For instance, in the United States, in Chicago, in Minneapolis, or in Minneapolis or the Midwestern cities, if you wanted to see pro wrestling, you were going to watch the AWA. There was no competition. So he didn't know how to counter program. He never had competition. That's not to say that it wasn't great wrestling, but it is to say that when he had to face McMahon, when McMahon came into his backyard, he didn't have any point of reference as to how to do that. So he was pretty unaware of, number one, culturally what was going on in the 80s, and number two, even to know that he had to update his product. And that was the problem. I mean, if you look at those early ESPN shows that I did with them, and you look at their talent, they had an incredible talent. They had Stan Hansen, Rick Martel, they had the Road Warriors, they had Kurt Hennig, they had Scott Hall. It just goes on and on and on. But he just didn't know what to do with them. It was a very staid and full product when McMahon was moving ahead with Hogan. I mean, Hogan came from the AWA, and Verne didn't know what to do with him.
Okay, now after you left the AWA, you moved full-time to the National Wrestling Alliance, and one of the things that noticed as a wrestling fan, and we've noticed it as well, was the harder-hitting style of the promotion, and also more gimmick matches. Can you tell us how it felt to witness those style of matches, such as the Tower of Doom at the Great American Bash of 1988?
It was thrilling. It was thrilling because it was a much more intense product. Not only because it was a harder-hitting style of wrestling, but because the themes were a lot edgier. Someone like Kevin Sullivan, who was portrayed, it wasn't spelled out, but he was portrayed as a devil worshiper. And he would, for instance, put Precious, who was the valet for Jimmy Garvin, under his spell and steal her away, and there were sexual undertones to it. It was just a much more exciting, hard-hitting in theme and in practice kind of wrestling. So it was really exciting. There was only one thing that they did that I didn't like and that I didn't understand, probably because I was raised in WWF. But traditionally, cage matches, the winner of the cage match is the first person to escape. And in the NWA at the time, you would win the match by being pinned. And I would always think, well, like, what's the big deal with the cage then? You know, the WWF used the cage to a more logical purpose. But other than that, I mean, it was wild. It was, a Southern brand of wrestling that I had never been exposed to before.
Okay, now obviously as a mainstream announcer with NWA/WCW, you must have seen a lot of weird stuff on your road travels. Any interesting road stories you can relate to us from your time in WCW?
It's your choice. Anything from Mick Foley losing his ear to the Arn Sid fight to just observing the different promotion leaders and the politics of it all. And I mean, it was wonderful being on the road. I loved it. I did my best, and I think I accomplished this, to pretty much stay out of any of the controversies, though I never failed to observe what was going on, which is the basic premise of my book, Bodyslams. It was just an exciting time to travel throughout the U.S. and Germany and England and Ireland and Northern Ireland. And it was just wonderful.
Now, you mentioned in that little answer there two things that we are going to be touching on now, to be quite honest. One of those being the Mick Foley ear loss in Munich. What was it like? Because obviously you went to the back holding Mick Foley's ear. How surreal was that?
Yeah, that's really odd. I mean, if you came up to me and you said, "Here's a human ear. Would you hold it for a little while?" I would shriek and have you committed. But when something like that happens that's of emergency kind of proportions, it's amazing what you would do. I didn't realize that his ear had been sheared off in the course of his match with Vader. All I had seen was the referee, who was a referee that was imported from France for part of the tour because one of the English-speaking referees had to return to the States. So he didn't speak English, I didn't speak French, and he was essentially told, here, put this striped shirt on, go out there and stay out of the way, because he wasn't used to working with our troupe. So I just saw at one point on the other side of the ring, I'm sitting with the table in front of me pushed up against the ring, so I'm nose to the mat. And I all of a sudden see this French referee freak. His legs were moving and his arms were flailing and he wasn't going anywhere. It was like he was running in place. And I thought it was weird, and I saw him crouch down and with his hands like tweezers, pick up an object, yell something to me, and flip it my way. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, this guy's on drugs. And as I'm watching this, and I see what he flipped to me as it came sliding across the mat, I noticed it was a raw piece of meat with a little bit of white tape and hair attached to it.
Oh, nice.
And when I realized, when I looked at Mick, and I looked at the referee, and I looked at Vader, and I looked at this lump of flesh in front of me, I realized that it was Mick's ear. So I just did what needed to be done, and I picked it up, brought it to the back. The guys in the back were amazed by what I had. Some of them were revolted by what I had, but I needed to find the doctor, because for there to be any chance at all for the ear to be reattached to Mick's head, we had to put it on ice. So I eventually made my way through the guys after they were staring at it, and some of them followed me from room to room as I was looking for the doctor, and gave it to the doctor. And they finished the match before I got back to the ring. So as I'm heading back to the ring, Mick is walking toward me with his hand over his head where his ear used to be, and he just said, "Bang, bang, I lost my ear." It was like so weird. But, I mean, it was accurate. but he was in shock, you know?
Jeez, I bet everybody was after seeing that.
Yeah.
Okay, now let's move our attention to the second one of those stories, and it happened at one of the international tours of WCW, which, funnily enough, one of the dates was in Bournemouth, which is our hometown. In 1993, billed as the Halloween Havoc tour, it was the site of the altercation between the Enforcer Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. Can you explain more about what happened on that eventful night?
The key to understanding, at least partly understanding as to why everything happened, was that we were exhausted. We had a big show that the night before we left to come over to Europe. We were shuttled over to the airport. We flew overnight. We were put on a bus once we got to the UK. We were on the bus for a couple more hours until we got to Bournemouth, did the show, and we're on our way back to a hotel. So everybody was wasted. Wasted both energy-wise, and there was also beer on the bus. When we got to the hotel, knowing that the American wrestlers were coming in, left the bar open. So some of the guys stayed at the bar and continued to drink. And I went to my room, and an argument ensued at the bar between Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious. Doug Dellinger, who was the head of security, was hanging out there, and he told both guys to go back to their rooms. Arn went back to his, which was across the hall from my room, and Sid went back to his room, which was on the other side of the hotel. But instead of staying in his hotel room, he stopped by his room, he picked up a chair, and lugged it over to Arn's door, and was pounding on Arn's door. Now, I'm trying to sleep, and I'm hearing some kind of a scuttle going on in the hallway, and I'm just thinking guys are fooling around. And then all of a sudden, it got louder, and the pictures from the paintings on my wall started to shake, and I knew that more was happening than just playful kind of stuff. And it was Sid who had wanted to continue the argument, had goaded Arn out into the hall to protect himself. Arn had taken with him a pair of scissors that he had in his cosmetic bag, and they went at it. When it was all done and we were in the hall, I wasn't going to go into the hall when, with this happening, obviously, and there was just blood all over the place, blood all over the carpets, blood all over the torsos of each man, blood all over the walls, and they were sent to the hospital and then sent back to the United States.
Unbelievable. To witness that firsthand has got to have been a pretty frightening situation. Now, moving on to...
It was on the front of your newspapers there.
It was.
That's right.
We can remember seeing the headlines.
I was amazed that within hours that the Bournemouth newspapers had full-blown pictures of each of those wrestlers. That just amazed me.
Yeah, that's British tabloids for you.
They're everywhere.
Okay, moving on to 1994. It was a groundbreaking year for WCW. Eric Bischoff, of course, fully in control of WCW, brings in Hulk Hogan to WCW. Do you think at the time it was a good thing for the company? And how did Hogan's presence affect the locker room at WCW?
There was mixed reaction. There were some who believed that he would... You must remember that leading up to the WWF acquisitions, up until then, and on, I think it was probably the last tour that I did in the UK, they had brought Davey Boy Smith in, they had brought Rick Rude in, and they continued their feud in WCW, and it was very successful. Feud. It wasn't anything that WCW had built, but that was because they didn't know how to build a feud. So there was hope by some of the roster, and there was, from others, there was not anger, but discontent, because many of us who had been there from the beginning of WCW had been working really hard to get the product over, and some of the wrestlers who they just felt, and they were stepped over by Hogan. So they had been working to maintain their spot, to advance their spot, and then all of a sudden making money that none of us had ever heard of at the time. Hogan comes in, so there was a divided locker room. It was. There were those who felt that he could work magic as he did in the WWF, and there were those who were, I guess, discontent, jealous. So it was a mixed bag.
Okay, now in 1994, your contract with WCW was coming up for renewal. Of course, you did sign for one final year. You went through an extensive negotiation period. Do you feel you were poorly treated by Eric Bischoff during this time? Of course, he brought in Michael Buffer for Clash of the Champions. How do you feel Bischoff really treated you as a performer?
I don't have any problem with the ultimate result. It's a funny thing. People in wrestling think that when they're hired by an organization that they have a job for life, and I never felt that way. It was I'm there as long as I could be some good to the promotion. So it wasn't the fact that he wanted to phase me out or he wanted to de-emphasize my role. It was how he did it. He was really dishonest. The first day, for instance, that he took over TV, which is our weekly syndicated show, he simply said to me, Gary, everything is fine. I just want you to announce a little quicker. I said, you want me to talk faster? He said, yeah. And what he wanted was to get me out of the ring as quickly as possible, never telling me that I was going to be a non-entity, never telling me that my microphone was essentially going to be off. It was that kind of dishonesty that I didn't like. It was trying to get me to come back for a major show, telling me that we would be negotiating for the next year, and then never negotiating. He did that with we used to do our weekly television tapings at Disney, and we did it for a week there, and once we did it for a week, we had 3 months of television in the can. And so he talked me into going to Disney, telling me that he would be negotiating during the course of the week, knowing that once the week was over, he had me on television for 3 more months. So it was the dishonesty that I didn't like. It wasn't that he phased me out. He had every right to do that. He was the boss.
Okay, now, more recently, you've done some work with Ring of Honor as a backstage interviewer and appeared on some of their DVDs. What's your opinion of Ring of Honor as a company and their place in the business?
I had a terrific time with Ring of Honor. Ring of Honor came to me at a time when I was very down about the future of wrestling, because I had attended several independent shows in the United States. I thought the quality was just pretty poor. And then one night I went to Philadelphia, and I bought a ticket, sat in the 3rd row to watch the show, and I was really impressed. That next week I sent them an email, and I told Gabe Sapowski, the booker there, and I simply told him, congratulated him on what they were doing, and told him if in any way I can help them out to let me know. And when I said that, and I made it clear to him that, well, 2 things. Number 1, I'm not interested in being a ring announcer. Number 2, when I tell you that I'll help you in any way, not necessarily in front of a camera. I just wanted to support the group. And so I had a wonderful time with them. I had a really good experience, and in fact, in the reissue of my book, Bodyslams, I wrote of some of the experiences that I had with Ring of Honor. So they were terrific. They wanted to go in a new direction, and I guess it's been about 1.5 years since I've worked with them.
Excellent. Now, during your illustrious career, you've introduced numerous performers, but who is your favourite wrestling superstar or diva to announce to the ring?
I really don't have a favorite. I mean, there were many, many people that I worked with that I really loved working with. I guess sentimental favorite would have been Bruno Sammartino, just because that's where it all began for me. He was the one that kept me watching wrestling as a kid, and then at one early point in my life, to be introducing him was awesome, you know. So I guess I would say Bruno for that reason, but there were just so many terrific people that I worked with.
Okay, now Bodyslam's Memoirs of a Wrestling Pitchman available online at the moment. You can get it from Amazon. We'll also be featuring links on our website. You can click straight through and purchase the book there. Now, Gary, if you were to sell the book, if we gave you 60 seconds to sell the book to us and everyone that's listening, how would you do it?
It's the most honest account of what goes on behind the scenes in wrestling. Because it's not sponsored by any organization. It's also one of the first. It was out there before Mick Foley's first book. And there is no agenda. Obviously, I'm not a wrestler, so I'm not putting myself over. I'm just giving a very honest assessment of the business of wrestling. So if there's anyone that wants to learn about the history of wrestling, you can take a crash course by just going through my career, and also my assessment of all of the major players during the 35 years that I was in wrestling, with no holds barred, and you can agree or disagree, but in the book I tell you why I feel how I feel. For instance, Sid Vicious was not one of my favorite people to work with. The Steiner brothers were not. McMahon is not. Bischoff was not. And I tell you why. But it's not a slam book. It's not a book to hurt anybody. It's just an even, honest assessment of that 35 years in wrestling.
Fantastic. Now, of course, as Lee mentioned, Bodyslam's Memoirs of a Wrestling Pitchman is available now. Thoroughly recommended. It's one of the best, if not the best, wrestling-related bio that either of us have ever read. Now, Gary, as we draw a close on this interview, it's been absolutely fantastic having you on here. Do you have any words for your fans right here in the United Kingdom?
Well, the first thing I would say, because I've really never had an opportunity to do this before, would be to thank all of the people in the UK and in Europe for the welcome that I always had whenever I toured Europe. I really appreciated that. We always were made to feel at home. And just to keep on enjoying wrestling. If you're not a fan of the major promotions, whether it be TNA or WWE, support your local independent promotions. That's where your future stars are coming from. Don't give up on wrestling, though. There are so many brands out there, even though they may not be on your weekly television. These guys need to be supported. They will depend upon you. So continue enjoying it. Don't let a poor product run you away from wrestling.
Okay, fantastic sentiment there, and definitely some words to live by there as regards to wrestling. It has its ups and downs, but stick with it. It'll get better again, and wrestling will always be there. Now, Gary, thank you once again for joining us this week on the Legends and Champions podcast. Stay on the line for us. We're just going to cut to a commercial break. We'll be back right after this.
If you like McGuire on Wrestling, you need to subscribe to the free McGuire on Wrestling podcast feed. Not only do you get access to the show a day early, but you also get free bonus content every week. Share a laugh with Mitch and Dimitri on the alternate commentary table.
Oh, I'm Cody Rhodes. Look at me.
Now, if this was Damian Priest, he'd apologize.
He probably would have apologized.
Follow along with the film career of one of wrestling's biggest stars with We've Seen a Movie.
Basically, I'm just watching John Cena play his wrestling character.
If John Cena was a raging alcoholic Atlantic City mooch before this.
Get all these shows, exclusive interviews, and more for free by subscribing to McGuire on Wrestling, wherever you get your podcasts.
Welcome back to Legends and Champions for this week, and well, that was a throwback. Going back in time to talk to Gary Michael Capetta from the original Legends and Champions podcast. We're going to be doing more of that over the next few weeks. Any sort of interviews or maybe some topics that we might have covered, we're going to bring them in to here. But, you know, Capetta, the world's most dangerous announcer, as dubbed by Cornette, you know, really was the most extensive out of all of them, you know, working in the WWF, the AWA, the NWA, and WCW. All right, let's move on to Saturday night's main event, because this Saturday, live on Peacock in the US or on YouTube here in the UK, we are bringing back, or the WWE are bringing back, I say we, it's nothing to do with me, one of the most iconic wrestling shows of all time. And this show not only revolutionized professional wrestling, but it left one of the most indelible marks on pop culture. So let's have a look at Saturday night's main event. And just like most things in the 1980s, it was created by Vince McMahon, but was actually the idea of Dick Ebersol, who was the chairman of NBC. And it aired on May the 11th, 1985. Now, the idea of Saturday night's main event was to capitalize on the absence of Saturday Night Live in the time slots. And it was to be a replacement. So they didn't want to keep airing the repeats, which had a shelf life. They wanted it to be current, to be exciting, to target a demographic. And the idea was to bring the excitement of professional wrestling to this audience by airing it on network TV for the first time. Nothing else was on network television. And it had a really different feel. Had a cold open at the beginning with promos and interviews setting the scene for what was to come. It featured star versus star matches, title defenses, speciality matches, which at that point was rarely seen. Now bear in mind, if you watch Superstars or Challenge, it would be a superstar versus a jobber. This was pay-per-view quality. And there were some really iconic moments to come out of Saturday night's main event. And the first one actually happened on the inaugural episode. And it featured Hulk Hogan, Bob Orton Jr., Ricky Steamboat, Barry Windham, and Mike Rotunda facing off against the Animal George Steele, Nikolai Volkov, and the Iron Sheik. and also had Wendy Richter facing off against the fabulous Moolah, really setting the tone for what this show was going to be. When else would you have seen star power like that? Not at WrestleMania, not at SummerSlam, not on a pay-per-view. In October of 1985, during an episode, Uncle Elmer, that was played by a performer called Stanley Frazier, married Joyce Statsko in the ring, accompanied and surrounded by legends like the Hulkster and Andre the Giant. And I know what you're thinking. You're sat there going, oh, it's a wrestling wedding. There would have been a body slam or an attack somewhere. No, absolutely not. It was a legitimate wedding that added unique aspect to the show. It had never been done before. In December of 1989, you had Mr. Perfect's betrayal. The legendary Kurt Hennig, Mr. Perfect, attacked the Hulkster with his own belt during a match against Lanny Poffo, the Genius, costing Hogan the match. And it was this point which changed Mr. Perfect. He became obsessed with the WWF Championship, a title, unfortunately, that he never won, but had some cracking moments along the way. It was in February of 1989 that Hulk Hogan and the Macho Man Randy Savage united after Savage was attacked by the Honky Tonk Man, leading to the formation of the Mega Powers, the alliance of one of the most memorable storylines in wrestling history. Not only the creation of the Mega Powers, but the destruction of the Mega Powers at WrestleMania 5. Some matches that really kind of set the tone go back to March has 1988. That was Hogan versus Andre. It was one of the most anticipated bouts in wrestling history, of course. It was the rematch from WrestleMania 3. Andre won, but Hogan's resilience and the iconic moment of Andre lifting Hogan's left leg to pin him left a lasting impression. And also, this was Dave and Earl Hebner's moment. The Four Horsemen went up against Demolition. It was Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard. They ended the near 500-day reign of Demolition as tag team champions. It showcased the dominance of the Brainbusters, and that took place in July of 1989. In December of 1988, the Macho Man Randy Savage challenged the Honky Tonk Man for the Intercontinental Championship. It ended in a disqualification when the Hart Foundation interfered, leading to the formation, again, of the Mega Powers. You can see how this storytelling was really being created at this point, this long-term storytelling. And in March 1988, Hulk Hogan faced off against Harley Race in a memorable match where Race attempted a headbutt splash off the top, but Hulk moved. This caused Harley Race to crash through the table, synonymous because it was one of the first table spots to ever take place in the WWF. So Saturday night's main event not only provided fans with unforgettable matches and storylines, but it really did play a crucial role in the rise of professional wrestling as a mainstream entertainment, worldwide domination. And its influence and its legacy continues to this day. Because this Saturday, it's back, taking place at the Nassau Veterans Memorial Coliseum in Long Island, airing on NBC and Peacock and on YouTube internationally. We're going to have some cracking matches. The undisputed WWE Championship on the line. Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare, will be defending against Kevin Owens, and tensions quite clearly have been rising between these two after a brutal attack by Owens in the parking lot following Bad Blood. Cody is out for revenge. Owen, on the other hand, blames Rhodes for his actions and for the chaos that ensued. So, you know what? We're not going to have a title switch here. You know, they want Rhodes to get to Mania to be 1 year. I'm still going Cody Rhodes. This next match, though, made official as of recording on Monday as part of Raw, the World Heavyweight Championship. Gunther, Balor, Damian Priest. I'm not interested. I think Gunther's being moved to SmackDown. I know we're not going to talk modern day. We've seen this match. This has built up from SummerSlam. It's built up from the Survivor Series. Gunther's going to retain, but it is going to be intriguing to see what happens at Saturday night's main event. The Women's World Championship is also on the line as Liv Morgan will defend against Io Sky. Sky earned the title shot after winning a Battle Royal on Monday Night Raw. And she's been silent but deadly. Some great spots at the Survivor Series. A great standoff between Rhea Ripley this past week on Raw. I don't think she's going to dethrone Morgan. I think that will be Ripley. But it could be a good match, and I expect a lot of things to happen. Raquel Rodriguez is going to be involved, you know that. Ripley, I imagine, will be involved, so it's going to be an intriguing one. The Women's US Championship will be determined at Saturday night's main event. It will be Bayley or Chelsea Green versus Mission or Tiffany Stratton. My money, we're going to find out on SmackDown what's going to happen, but my money is Bayley versus Tiffany Stratton, and I think they will give it to Tiffany Stratton. So that will make it more intriguing. Why? She already holds the Women's Money in the Bank briefcase. If she's got the championship, does that make Nia Jax think she's not going to cash in anytime soon? So my money's on Tiffany Stratton. And the last match is Sami Zayn versus Drew McIntyre. This one isn't going to be straightforward. McIntyre will get the win. I think the New Bloodline are going to get involved. But whatever happens, it is making Saturday night's main event to be an explosive show. I cannot wait. I'm looking forward to hearing what the ACT guys think about it this Saturday in their official preview, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Mike says on Sunday following Saturday night's main event. What we do know is that Jesse the Body Ventura is returning to the WWE, will be sat in the broadcast position for the 4 shows taking place over 25. I cannot wait. It's going to be iconic. Bring David Penza back now. There we go. Thanks for joining me this week for Legends and Champions. A different show, a unique show. Did you like the format? Did you don't? Did you not? Did you don't? Let me know on the comments at Team MOW. Just before we go, though, I'm just going to find it. We had a really good comment from the one and only Joe Aguinaldo on the Team MOW Facebook. And if you want to be a part of that, all you need to do is search for Team MOW, and you can join this wonderful community that has been developed by Mike and all of us and all of the hosts and everybody around. Trying to find it. If I can't find it, here we go. So we were talking about, is Hulk Hogan the greatest of all time? Joe Aguinaldo, good pod, Andy. Regarding your Hogan question, it's hard to compare eras because of different sensibilities. Hogan was huge in an era where people didn't admit to being wrestling fans, and it was still very much a subculture, versus Austin and Rock, who took it to the next level. I'm going to say Hogan had the biggest impact, but Rock is the biggest star. What do you think? Do you agree with that? I'm on the fence. I know where you're coming from. I'm on the fence. But great to hear from you, Joe. And Joe will be coming on the show very soon to take part in Ask Us Anything. That's it for now. I'm going to head off into the distant sunset. I'm going to get my popcorn ready for Saturday night's main event. I will see you next week with more LAC. Until then, so long, farewell, see you at the matches. Bye-bye now.
This has been Legends and Champions with Andy Evans. Thank you for listening.